stepped off the plane from Washington a couple of hours ago. Matt Frei, good morning to you, Matt.
Good morning to you, Matthew.
It is. I mean, the word extraordinary doesn't really do it justice. I mean, you presumably have never seen the like. I've never seen the like.
So I was in Washington yesterday. I wasn't allowed into the Oval Office because I'm not part of the White House pool and I wasn't part of Zelensky's travelling press. But gradually, the transcript of what transpired emerged. And the transcript, the words written down on paper, was pretty bad. And of course, we wanted to see what the body language is like. And the first image I saw was, Zelensky smiling and Trump smiling. I thought maybe it's not as bad as it looks on paper. And of course, the reality is that it was so much worse. For me, there was a couple of key questions. Was this a trap laid by Zelensky,
Yes.
so by Trump and by Vance? I suspect it was, especially the way that Vance piled in. Was it for television and ratings purposes? Yes. I mean, forget ratings for a minute, but I think you have to understand with Trump, it's all about the attention. It's all about the limelight.
Politics
it's all about
is
getting
showbiz for ugly people.
It is. And he achieved that, of course. So when he said rather glibly, rather cynically, that's great TV, of course it's great TV. I mean, it's
such a crass thing to say.
It's a crass thing to say. It's a terrible thing to say, but it is great TV. And especially great TV if you're watching it on a screen in the Kremlin. But I think the other thing is that, Trump wants something. And if you look at his face, he was really, really angry. And he was angry with Zelensky because Zelensky didn't want to sign the deal as it existed. Trump wants that deal signed because Trump wants to be able to say, at the end of week 6 in the White House, I signed a deal with Zelensky to bring peace to this appalling part of Europe. He doesn't care whether, Russia started it or what will happen in the future. But in the here and now, he wants that moment that will at some stage, he hopes, translate into a signing ceremony with Putin and Zelensky, or maybe another Ukrainian president in the White House, and then maybe even a Nobel Peace Prize. That's what he wants. And that is Zelensky's only card with Trump, Trump's vanity.
The notion of the setup, and lots of people are asking here, what has Putin got on Trump? It feels like Trump is sort of beholden to Putin.
We did a whole Channel 4 documentary years ago about the compromat. Is there a picture, is there a bit of evidence that Putin occasionally reminds Donald Trump of? And we couldn't find anything. We looked for quite a long time. There may be something. We don't know. But again, remember, there's an awful lot of stuff on Trump that is embarrassing for Trump, and he doesn't really seem to care, whether it was the tapes about, grabbing private parts and whatever. I think the key thing is Trump just likes Vladimir Putin.
Okay, so does he also dislike Zelensky? And specifically, because I spoke to an American commentator earlier, I'm kind of surprised that so little is made of Trump's first impeachment, which directly involves
That is
Zelensky.
very important. I'm glad you mentioned it. They have bad blood between each other. They have history. They have baggage. And Trump doesn't forget. He has a very long memory, especially when someone has crossed him. And the only way you can come back from that is if you kiss the ring and you apologize. The way that David Lammy did, who called Trump all sorts of things and has kissed the ring and apologized, I'm assuming in private. The way that J.D. Vance did. I mean, he compared him to Hitler. And then apologized and is now working side by side. Zelensky hasn't apologized. And remember, Trump's modus operandi is a kind of extortion. I mean, he does behave like a mafia boss. He said to Zelensky in 2019 in that phone call that he described as the perfect phone call, unless you give me dirt on Hunter Biden, the son of the guy who's going to run against me in the presidential election, I will not give you arms, the kind of military assistance that you need in the middle of a low-level war with Russia. I mean, that's an extraordinarily awful thing to do. And Zelensky basically said, I'm sorry, I'm not playing this game. Trump remembers that. And of course, it led to the impeachment proceedings. That would never have happened if Zelensky hadn't said no to Trump. So there is bad blood there. And it all came bubbling out of Trump's mouth in his gestures, through his eye sockets yesterday. It was extraordinary to see this. I mean, both Vance and Trump and Zelensky behaving in their kind of rawest, type, as it were. And of course, Zelensky, I mean, of course it was undiplomatic the way he responded. And he should have been wiser. The one trick he missed, by the way, he should have had a translator. Because imagine all that filtered through a translator who might even tweak a few words here and there because it slows everything down.
That's a great idea.
But also, it's normally what happens. But I've interviewed Zelensky, and I must say, I spent an hour with him in the bunker in Kyiv. I really liked the man. He's short, he's got a firm handshake, he looks you in the eye. There is a charisma around him. But he also prides himself, because he's got better at it, at appealing to an Anglo-Saxon or global audience in English. And his English has got better, much better over time. But it's not good enough in the rawness of the emotion to respond to people like Vance and Trump. And I think you could actually see his English disintegrate in the process. And he was clearly enraged by all of it, as he would be. I mean, here is Trump calling him a dictator, Trump calling him as gambling with World War III, when it was Putin who was rattling the nuclear sabers. I mean, it's outrageous stuff, frankly. Of course you're going to get upset.
So I was intrigued in the early hours. I was hearing that Trump, with massive support base, the meeting was viewed as a massive result for Donald Trump. What was the atmosphere like in Washington where you were? I mean,
it depends. Everything you say about America is true and the opposite. So Trump supporters thought it was great. And I was always struck in the run-up to the elections how many Republicans had really turned against aid for Ukraine, military and otherwise. They thought it was a waste of money. They thought that Zelenskyy didn't use the money properly, didn't use the weapons properly. So, of course, that appeals to that particular demographic. But there are other Americans, especially Democrats, who are licking their wounds at the moment, who are very consumed with the domestic revolution that's going on, the stripping down of the federal machinery of government, the sacking of tens of thousands of people, not just USAID, I mean everything. I mean, you have no idea how desperate the mood is inside Washington and in democratic cities for what's going on politically. And the two are linked. The domestic revolution that is brought about by a combination of Trump, Vance, and Musk to basically, clean out the stables of the deep state, as they would call them, is directly linked to what they're doing on the international stage. And we have to get used to the idea that this is the new normal. However nice he might be to Keir Starmer on a Wednesday and nasty to Zelenskyy on a Thursday, this is the new normal.
Pleasure talking to you. I won't ask you about Europe's reaction because you've got a 3-hour show to do.
2 hours.
2 hours. 2 hours.
Long enough after no sleep.
Let me just read out a few more of your thoughts before we hand you over to Matt. So Ursula says Europe should strengthen NATO, not dilute it. With a European army, they should match the USA so they have more of a say about the way to deal with Russia. Kath says, I don't think any trade deal made with Trump would benefit the UK. Why would it? Well, tariffs, if there were no tariffs on steel, that would benefit the UK, relevant to our other international competitors. Steve says, Matthew, enough of the cowering. Following yesterday, Trump is much weaker on the world stage. At home, the majority have turned against him. Yesterday was a protest, no shop day. The big stores were empty across the US. Vance is the danger. I have to say, he's a horrible piece of work, in my opinion. Vance is the danger. His intervention yesterday shows his ambition to be the hard man of the far right. Dangerous, vile individual. That's what Steve says, by the way, not me.